Hello and welcome to Movie Mayhem. Today we're going to talk about Six Underground, the last year's Netflix only release from director Michael Bay. Now, this is kind of important because it's the second kind of big Netflix only film. The first being The Irishman, which was about actually more expensive in budget than Six Underground, supposedly due to all the digital aging stuff that they did. So kind of interesting if you think about it from a budget perspective. But this is kind of their first, their foray into starting to making these big budget films that aren't coming out to the theaters. So that's also, kind of a landmark thing that's happening. Theaters have long since been struggling to maintain that audience, and if you look at the box office, it's pretty much only films geared directly towards children have a chance of succeeding anymore. Now, by the same argument, you look at, there was a Trolls movie was recently released, direct to video, or direct to streaming, and in a way that works very well for families, especially larger families. You don't have to take all the kids. The younger kids can come with you. You don't have to spend $100 buying popcorn and soda. So it's a very interesting change in the landscape of how things are going to happen. But again, this is going to be about Six Underground. So I recently was talking about the decline of the cinematic civilization, and that still holds true, but I'll start off with, I really liked it. Bay's last film, The Last Night, I felt was a bit uninspired. It was still beautiful to watch, but I could really tell it felt like even at that point he was tired of doing it, and there's nowhere else really to go in that context. So that's fine and dandy. Now he's going back to doing his other type of thing. So, starring Ryan Reynolds. You get what Ryan Reynolds is, right? I really like him. I think he's great, especially in the more serious roles. I really like him. And he inserts some of, the traditional quippy type of Ryan Reynolds humor throughout the movie, which works very well. But this movie starts out with a 20-minute car chase scene, like, French Connection level of awesome. I was honestly blown away by the car chase scene. All practical effects. This is not a Fast and the Furious where everything looks like a freaking computer. Bay managed to do Fast and the Furious better than Fast and the Furious because it's all real cars doing real stuff, and you don't realize how much you miss that till you see it. And I was just like watching it going, this is so cool. Wow, the scope, the way the cars move, the way they skid, everything just looks so almost foreign. And that's the same reason you can go back and watch old car chase scenes in movies from the 70s or 80s, and they're still really neat because of the realism. Whereas you get to that CGI factor now, you get shots that are impossible, right? And it's so in real life, and they don't feel natural. That car scene is just super. That's the way to kick off a film. It's a Michael Bay film. You're gonna get a adrenaline-pumping action film. Know that going in. So those of you that watch the channel and like to, complain, like, you don't know what good film is, I think, honestly, those people don't know what the purpose of film. If you're not entertained, they've already failed out of the gate. You can be entertained by a very intellectual, deep movie with multiple metaphors and hidden meanings. That can be entertaining too. There's a lot of them. But the bottom line is, the movie has to entertain first. If it doesn't entertain in some manner, then what's the point? And yes, even films like Cannibal Holocaust entertain, even though they have all kinds of different meanings. But it is entertaining, even if it's disturbing. That still incites, that emotion, that adrenaline that causes entertainment. So the story of Six Underground, Ryan Reynolds leads a team of people to go right the wrongs in the world. It's like a combination of like an Ocean's 11 meets a Fast and the Furious meets Suicide Squad. They're kind of like vigilante superheroes, but they're not particularly good. And I really like that. But they're not comedically bad either. It's they're good at what they do, but they've never done this before, so they make mistakes, and it plays off the mistakes with really good humor. The timing of the dialogue works really well in the film. Again, it's not super deep. There is some cool concepts about, like, what if you could just die and wash away everything? What do? Who do you become? You know, and what would drive you to do that? In this case, there's Ryan Reynolds' character is dealing with grief and transposing that into, you know, hey, I have all this money, so I need to do something good for the world, and he takes on this mission. Doesn't get hung up on going to a lot of backstory, which I'm a big fan of. I don't need a ton of backstory, and I don't really need any backstory on a bad guy, unless it fits it can fit the story, but I don't need it, right? He's the bad guy, we know that. I love that it's set against Turkestan, which is not a real place. I actually believe the scenes that were there near the end where it's Turkestan, I believe that's in the United Arab Emirates, if I'm remembering my topography correctly, that's where it looks like. But the idea is it's a fictional country run by a dictator, and he's going to right the wrongs and overthrow that. So it's got this is R-rated, there's some good violence. There's a great scene, it's subtly sprinkled too. It's not a gore factor movie, but the gore works in conjunction with the film very well. And throughout the film, what you'll see is, again, Michael Bay's trademark. Monstrous shots. This is a 239 film. Monstrous shots of real footage. Not digitized, not green screen. Landscapes. And that brings back, it really makes you feel that Lawrence of Arabia, you know, the Ten Commandments, where it's just huge. It doesn't matter what, one person standing on a road next to a car, but the scope is monstrous, and you feel it because it's a real shot. You feel this huge scope. I feel like that movie cost $500 million. It just looks that big. One of the things, a lot of this is, you know, Bay's always done this, but it's got the voguing, right? Where you know you're in a movie universe. Everybody looks cool pretty much all the time. They're all set against either a fan blowing their hair, and that is, you know, that for me is really what you need in this type of film. I need that fantasy level heroes. I need that over-the-top kind of amazingness. And we don't really have directors left that do that. I thought Tony Scott would have been, you know, he did it same kind of concepts, only much more dramatic and much less action fantasy, but more serious, and was much better with his dialogue, in my opinion. But this really takes me back to that action film that doesn't exist anymore. And, you know, this is the film I would have gone to a theater to see because it was just huge. There's some interesting winks to the audience, and it's not really fourth wall breaking, but I feel like Bay had to know the jokes and was purposely putting him in there. There's a couple of lines about family, which have to be making fun of the absurdity of the Fast and the Furious things. Maybe I'll go into another thing. You all know I like those movies. I wasn't a fan of the latest one. It was kind of got to the point of too silly, but the whole family focus just is ludicrous. Like, no, those movies are nothing about family. They're literally mindless action films. Stop it with the family. But he throws it in such a way, and it's just subtle enough that it's like a sarcastic, fourth wall breaking jab. They talk, and they even mention, one of the characters mentions, like, next time, why don't we do a heist? So again, it's like, it's self-aware, but not so self-aware that it becomes a parody. They've got, the final boat sequence is just really cool. The whole action scene across the boat sequence with the way it's orchestrated. Honestly, if you like action movies, watch it. I don't know. I've been a fan of Michael Bay ever since, you know, he came out. I got to meet him at the premiere of Armageddon, and that was really cool. And he was a nice guy. I mean, we're not like buddies or anything. I literally shook his hand. That was it. But I've always been fascinated by what he pulls off. Because if you really look, if you know a lot about the behind the scenes of filmmaking, watch the scenes that he does, and then look at how long it took him to film the movie. It just, and the budgets, it doesn't make sense, really. If you take his budgets, in order for most people to do that, you have to double or triple them. I do not know how he pulls off the amount of shots in a day he can get with that scope. It's crazy. Lots of good practical stunts, and again, the movie's filled with practical effects. There's one scene where they're doing cars where it's the merged practical plus CGI, because they have like whatever support beams falling from above. Obviously, those are CGI, but he does it the same way he did the Transformers by merging that CGI with practical effects, so it almost tricks you into not understanding you're seeing CGI because the CGI is so subtle. And again, I'm a big fan of that, and I think that makes movies hold up as well. It's like when you watch heavy CGI movies like Phantom Menace, it was great when it came out. Watch it now. The CGI is kind of, and that's like, especially 90s stuff like Spawn. Oh my, CGI is horrible. But I can watch The Thing, and it's still awesome today because of the practical effects. So I'm a little biased on the practical effects, and my adrenaline was pumping the whole movie, and I just kept repeating to myself, like, this is really good. And what was funny is, those of you that don't know, I don't watch trailers, don't watch commercials. I have zero, I don't see any advertisements for films unless one of my actual friends sends me something. And then usually it's like an information thing. I don't usually watch trailers. So I didn't realize this had come out. I found it, I was doing research for the Decline of Film Civilization episode, and I saw Bay had made a movie last year. I'm like, what the hell is that? So that's why I went, checked it out. But I will say one thing. Never seeing commercials or trailers for films before watching them is a really cool experience because you have no expectations going in. I would recommend it. I find it very exciting, and you could get just slapped in the face like, whoa, I did not see that coming, and it's kind of cool. So back to Six Underground. This is a movie definitely, tons of rewatchability. This harkens back to the witty dialogue like in The Rock. I would much more focus this as a Bad Boys Rock. Not as absurd as like Bad Boys 2. I keep forgetting that fantastic movie he made, 33 Days, 40... The war movie he made. It's got that level of intense action. Again, a Pain and Gain would be a lot of the humor. That I think that was his pinnacle of great humor. So excellent example of Bay's work, and again, an excellent modern action movie, which there are none of. I'm not counting like superhero stuff. This is a real action movie with real effects, punching, and no crazy just cuts. One of the things Bay's trademark is, and he really does in this a lot, if you watch his cuts, they're all dolly cuts. And I have no idea how he pulls this off, but if you watch a shot in most modern action films, you get that 1, 2, 3 cut, 1, 2, 3 cut, 1, 2, 3 cut, or worse yet, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and it's just cut to these static shots. He doesn't do that. It'll be a dolly, cut dolly, cut crane, cut dolly. Every single shot is overly complex. So it's kind of almost like filmmaking masturbation in a way, but I like it. So definitely over the top. So highly recommend Six Underground. If you're a fan of Ryan Reynolds, you'll definitely enjoy him in it. Those of you that are fans of Michael Bay, obviously you'll love the film. Those of you that are not, if you're not a fan of Michael Bay as a whole, I don't know what to tell you. You just don't like that kind of film, so it's not going to help. It's not going to change your opinion, but I think it is definitely a very good example of his work and something that helps keep my hope alive for modern film. But it goes back to one of the issues I mentioned. Director that's been directing more than 25 years. So, one thing I'd love to see, if you guys can recommend me some new directors that have made more than one great film, but they haven't been directing forever. I'd love to see that. Usually when I look at a director's work, 3 films minimum. And I want to see, usually the first film can be a little rough, but second and third ones have to be pretty out of the park, right? And, that says to me, okay, this is a solid director. A lot of times what I notice is a director can make one great film and then they become a studio tool and they just make generic films. And Brett Ratner is a perfect example. Is he a bad director? No, but it could be anybody. I can't tell when I watch a film directed by him, it could have been directed by 100 different people. There's nothing that says, hey, that looks like a film from, and especially if you look like Sergio Leone. You could watch a 10-second clip from any of his films and you're gonna guess who made it. It's just because his style was so intrinsic to the way he made films. Coppola as well, Orson Welles, any of the classic directors, Kubrick especially. Kubrick is insanely signature in his directing style. And of course all my favorite directors. That's something I'd really like to see. So I'm definitely some recommendations on those. Some directors kind of test them out and see if we have some new generation that have been able to pull off some great films. What I've seen is most of them, they get to make one film, maybe 2, and then they don't seem to get money to make anything else and they disappear for years on end. Anyway, 6 Underground. Check it out. Great, exciting film. And don't forget to like, subscribe. If you can, check out Patreon. And we'll see you here next time on Movie Mayhem.